Greetings, Exiles. GGG here. Today I just wanted to talk to you about this new update that we just got for POE 1, the Legacy of Phrecia event. There are going to be some changes to the way that endgame works in this event. They're actually removing the Atlas passive tree, so no more Atlas passive tree. They're replacing it instead with this specialization system with idols. So you might notice this idol board, kind of a strangely shaped board, very similar to Sanctum, where you get your Sanctum relics and you Tetris them in here for special effects. So this is one of the idols. They have seemingly exactly the same mods that you would find on the Atlas passive tree, and then some unique ones that replace the keystones. Pretty drastic change to how the endgame will play, and I have a couple of things to say about this, but before I get into any of my concerns or comments, it does seem that this is going to be a 1-month event, and that the system probably won't exist as a core system replacement outside of that event. I can't imagine that GGG is planning on just deleting the Atlas passive tree. So take everything that I say as a criticism of this contained event. And yeah, so just the first concern that I have, I think, is based on the rarity of these idols. So down here, GGG says that with the Atlas tree, you can only get so much of a given stat because that's how much we put on the tree. But with the system, you can get a lot more of certain things, pushing limits and boundaries further than ever. Now that sounds good in theory. They're trying to tout it as a plus. And I really hope that it does turn out to be a plus. But the only thing that I can think, we don't know how rare these things are going to be. If they're plentiful and you drop way more than you need, then what makes them worth trading? If they are not plentiful, then you have to trade for your endgame progression sitting in your hideout instead of playing the game and going and getting more passives. And trade has been the elephant in the room with PoE for as long as I can remember. It's just been the most friction-filled, least fun part of the entire game. Whenever you have to trade for something, it usually breaks the flow of the entire game, stops you from playing, forces you to go to another site, to trade with people, and that's always been, I guess, just okay. A little bit frustrating when it's a gear upgrade that you want, but it's probably never been something, at least if you're progressing naturally through your character and through the tree and like one tier of maps at a time, you probably never needed the thing that you were going to purchase to continue playing the game. It would probably have just improved your experience. But in this case, you're seemingly now having to trade for your endgame progression, which is a crazy step back from just being able to play the game one map at a time, get your points, and then continue playing. And if they're rare and expensive to find synergistic mods on, that brings me to my next concern, which is that the Atlas passive tree was completely free and only required you to progress through maps, with the first, maybe 9-10 tiers of maps being really accessible to most players. Once you start getting into red maps, you might start running into some hurdles. But that's a good number of points for you to play around with. And by that point, you also have your second Atlas tree to play around with. Now, you don't have that. You don't have any of that progression to keep you going at a point where your character's power is petering off. You're beginning to get fewer and fewer passive points for your character. You would then start getting more passive points for your skill tree. So it was a nice little bridge of progression. It also gave players something to work towards at endgame, which they've clearly expressed with PoE 2 that the current endgame progression is not what they want it to be, because it doesn't give players any direction. You get to maps, and then you're told to complete 10 tier 1s and 10 tier 2s, and so on until you've completed all of the maps that there are to complete. But that's not very compelling, and I feel like this is actually just going towards that, and I don't really understand why the lack of progression could be touted as a good thing. I'm just concerned that this is going to leave players without any sort of meaningful and constant progression throughout maps. Another thing that's concerning to me is the potential stash space issue. This is a 1-month league with some of their most unhinged ideas by their own admission that are not going core, right? So there have been stash space issues with core leagues before. I'm getting PTSD of buying multiple quad tabs in Necropolis and still running out of stash space for all of those corpses. I can't imagine that there's going to be a dedicated stash for this one, and if there is one, it probably won't have enough space, which is really going to hurt players which have not purchased any tabs. I'll be fine, I'll just hate it because I'll break out my quad tabs again and fill them with idols that I'll probably never use and won't have the patience to price check to trade to other people. But taking a core system which has its own keybind, its own graphical user interface, and shifting that over to something which is going to sit in your stash, take up physical stash space, and be more loot to pull out of a map, it just feels like a regression. The reason why I am concerned about these things and why I'm making this video is not because I'm concerned about PoE's core progression or gameplay in any way. Like I said, I don't think this stuff is going to actually go core, or, you know, if it does, it's probably not going to permanently replace the Atlas passive tree because it's just such a good system. I can't imagine that they would completely do away with it. However, there are too many changes happening at once in this event. I was initially really excited when I started to see all of those cool unhinged ascendancies that they were putting out. They were fun, they were fresh. That was a cool change. That was a cool major change that they were doing. Maybe we would see some new builds coming out that have never been done before. And if all of the ascendancies get replaced, then it's a complete Wild West situation, which is great because that's exactly what I wanted out of PoE 2. And that's what I got for the first, you know, few weeks of PoE 2. And it was fantastic. And I was looking forward to having that again. That change on top of this change is just a little concerning for me because in order to enjoy those new ascendancies now, I have to play within an endgame which I feel is lacking one of the most compelling core progression systems for me. Maybe that's not how everybody feels. I'm interested to see how people feel because this is quite polarizing. I mean, once again, it's a temporary event, but it's an additional month tacked on to the end of a very long GGG PoE 1 hiatus that has a lot of people up in arms already. So, I don't know. What are you thinking? Is this too far for you? Do you feel like GGG has made a decision that's going to keep you from enjoying PoE 1 for another month? Because that's kind of what it's feeling like to me. I was excited to play when I saw those new ascendancies. Now maybe not so much. I might just take a month to continue playing other games. So with that, I will leave you. If you decide to play the event, I hope that you have a fantastic time and that maybe these concerns are completely misplaced. And I hope that it's a fantastic testing ground for GGG to figure out what the system could potentially be for PoE 1 or for PoE 2. Anyway, I'm GGG, and I'll see you in the next one.